What's the most elaborate scam you fell for? StoolToad9 said. At the start of college one year when everyone was moving into houses in the usual shitty but affordable part of a college town, a guy walks up to us and said he can get us free HBO. He'd just take $20. He knew a guy. We're like, cool. He takes out his cell phone, walks a few steps away out of earshot, says check our TV. We go, and lo and behold, HBO. We give him $20 and he walks away. A week later, it was gone. The dude just called HBO for some free trial week. He must have hit up every college kid moving in that day and made bank. Nelk said. I had free HBO for a couple years. Apparently at the time it was broadcast on the coax cable, but there was a physical filter that blocked the signals from people who weren't paying for it. And yeah, it was up on the telephone pole. You couldn't get to it yourself. We were having all these problems with internet connectivity and the service tech was really nice and getting equally fed up with the corporate bureaucracy giving us the runaround. They kept trying to say our network was bad and the technician kept checking and saying that the problem was on the back end. At one point we were hanging out for an hour waiting for them to reset something on the back end and chatting about video games and stuff. The tech had to climb the pole for like a fifth time, and it was finally working. He's like, so yeah, there's a physical filter that blocks HBO. It probably wasn't causing your internet problems, but you never know, so I took it off to be on the safe side and I couldn't find a replacement in my truck with a wink and a nudge. Then he continued, if someone else comes out and catches it, they might put one back on, but until then, enjoy free HBO. It ended up being like 3 years. BlackMach1NE said. I put a room up for rent once. Someone applied and said they would be moving in at the first of the month. They said they were military and switching bases. This person said they were going to go ahead and ship their car out and fly in. The car arrived and was offloaded by truck. A few days later the car was gone. The person never arrived. A month or so later the police knocked and asked about the car. Ended up being that the car was stolen by whoever this person was that shipped it, and the person who picked it up was a buyer who thought it was legit. Apparently he had a set of keys mailed to him and a fake title. IDK if it ever got sorted, but they initially assumed that I was a part of it. Have you seen my life? Said. Visa gift cards are also an elaborate scam on their own. It's almost impossible to use it all because you have to know exactly how much is left on it, and if you forget about them for a few months too long, everything's gone in inactivity fees or whatever else they call their way of putting an expiration date on your money. And they have the balls to call it the perfect gift. Doogie Burrows said. I don't know if it's necessarily the most elaborate scam of all time, but there are a range of fake sites online that offer us a visa for entry into the US. The funny thing about the sites is that they actually process your visa, but they just do it by sending your details to the official site and charging you $100 or so of idiot tax. I got quite a few years back and I wasn't even really mad. It was such an amazingly set up grift, and what made it even better was that you really had no recourse because they were actually giving you what you paid for. Mox Emerald said. I can't believe I fell for the scam on Diablo 2 LOD where you go to a spot in the town of Act 2 and turn on PvP and then you pick up your corpse with a loaded inventory and it drops all your actual items. It seems like the other person can't kill you because you are in town, but there is one small spot. It was a complicated set of weird instructions that I followed for some reason. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking that day. I can't even believe I was ever that stupid at some point in my life. Fanuadaver1 said. Ah boy, I still cringe about that. Back in the late 90s, early zeros when chat rooms were popular, I met this guy there and we ended up chatting pretty much daily. He had an unusual name for the region. That should have been the first clue. We chatted and sent letters to each other, by actual post, tried to meet up with him so many times, but he always had something come up. One night on New Year's Eve when we were supposed to meet finally, his cousin shows up and said yeah, he'll come soon. He told me to wait here with you. Pretended to call him several times to ask where he was. An hour or so later I just went back home and never talked to the guy again. Turned out the cousin was the guy I was chatting with and he had made a deal with another guy to see how long I would believe all this. I can't believe I fell for it. Keep in mind I was 16-something back then. Capricorn said. My grandmother gave away my grandparents' life savings to a Nigerian scammer. She fell for one of those emails from someone stating my grandfather's long-lost uncle died and left them $2 million and two Mercedes and they needed $5,000 to process the transaction. This went on for close to 2 years. The money was taken slowly. Each time they called, it was a different excuse. The car was stuck in California in customs and they needed money to get it out. The car was halfway there but ran out of gas, or blow a tire. It was one thing after another. My dad and the rest of the family begged her to stop sending money, but she truly believed in her heart the money and cars were on their way. Sad really. My dad contacted every government agency there was to try to stop it. But they all said they couldn't help because she was willingly still giving them money. Eventually, I think she came back to reality. My grandfather got on the phone and told them he thought they were a scammer and they threatened his life. Said they knew where he lived and such. So, they were paranoid for a while that these guys were going to come after them. It's been about 5 years since all that happened and my grandfather has passed away. Now my grandmother doesn't have enough social security to live on and my dad has to send her money to get by because she gave all hers away. Jealous Network 8852 said, I used to work in a bank. We had a 90-year-old man who started coming and taking out cash, $2K, $3K at a time. Then he started sending wire transfers out of the country. I sat him down to talk to him, and he explained that he was a businessman, and that he knows all about these email scams. This was different. He was helping a barrister in Benin retrieve $7 million, and was going to use it to help children worldwide. This was when I found out he was calling various youth organizations around our area and was pledging large donations. He absolutely refused to believe it was a scam. He told me that he had switched from cash to wires because Western Union had banned him. I spoke to security and made the decision to stop sending his wires. He would come in, fill out the request with me, and I would shred it. I emailed the scammers and told them I knew what they were doing and they'd never see another dime from him. They told him to try a big bank like Chase or the Citibank knowing they wouldn't pay as close attention. I tried to speak to his son, but he didn't seem to understand. Unfortunately, he ended up passing away shortly after this. His daughter called me a few weeks later to thank me, as she was going through his records and emails, and said that we probably saved him tens of thousands. These people are truly the scum of the earth. Captain MKG said, much like most people here, I don't really know how elaborate this is, and I technically did not get fully scammed, but it was one of those job interview scams where they take you to another platform to conduct it. It was for a job I had recently applied for. I get a text and I had no reason to doubt it since I was on a job hunt and for some reason they were able to determine the position I wanted. They mentioned that I would need to download a messaging app to conduct a chat interview. Did everything they asked, even the whole come back tomorrow for the continuation. Essentially, the scam is they make you go through that whole process and get you to give your direct deposit, aka bank, information for your paycheck. I almost fell for it too and was almost going to send it until I had a gut feeling because the pay was way too good to be true. I contacted the actual company and they fortunately emailed back and said there have been many scams recently and that the text I got was one of them. I'm usually very good at avoiding scams, but I guess I was desperate and almost fell for one. Some big dog said, a phone call just as I graduated high school. I nearly fell for it. I was maybe 17-18 years old still looking for a job. The call goes as this. Hi, my name is John Doe, and I am with the FBI. We have a warrant out for your arrest. I'm terrified because it sounded real, so I kept listening. It seems you owe $259.27 in taxes. You may call the IRS, or you may mail it to somewhere to sort the issue. My heart was racing because though I was wanted for tax evasion before my first job. I asked my dad what I should do and he told me to call the local sheriff's department, so I did. I was relieved to hear that I didn't have a warrant and that it was a scam. 1234 Tempcore said, if we were strictly talking about true scams, back in 2009 I was building a race car and got duped by a fabricator. The fabricator had a relatively crummy website, but his fab skills looked really nice. I couldn't afford a Hogan sheet metal intake because they run thousands and thousands of dollars, and I was already running out of budget. This guy was selling custom sheet metal intakes for $1,500 or so. You'd pay him 50% up front and the rest once the intake was finished. He took about 20 orders on a forum I was on. Then, the sneaky snot goblin took one intake that he made, took various pictures from different angles and sent it to everyone as their unique build. When it came time to get the last payment, he closed shop, killed his website, and skipped town with about $30K. Nobody got their orders. I tracked the little turd down a few years later by pulling county tax records and finding his ex-wife, who was more than happy to give me his contact info. I threatened to file a suit against him for grand swindling, up to $1 million federal fine. He paid me back half of what he owed me and claimed he was living on breadcrumbs. If we're talking scams in general, my former employer lied to me for close to 10 years before royally screwing me over. We're talking 6 figures worth of personal losses on top of medical issues from stress, sleep deprivation, etc. from working 3500-4000 HR years. Responsible Raisin 88 said, went into PC World Curries to buy a PC about 8 years ago. Was offered a rent contract paying monthly, which I looked over, and it said I could keep the computer after 2 years or just upgrade to a brand new one. The total price was only a couple of £100 more than buying it outright. Anyway, I decided not to have this rent contract and told them I wanted to buy it to keep but pay monthly. They drew up a new contract and I checked it. It said to own paying monthly and not to rent like the previous contract. I signed it and they went to photocopy it, so we both had a copy. Looked at the front of the paperwork and it said to own. Happy, I went home. 2 years later I get a harsh letter saying I failed to return the computer and needed to phone them ASAP or I would be taken to court. I dug out my paperwork and saw it said to own, so after back and forth I looked deeper into the small print to see if I had missed something. It was the correct front page, but when they went to photocopy it they must have switched the paperwork. Responsible Raisin 88 said, the part where I signed looked exactly the same in both contracts, so my signature said I had only rented a computer. The terms and conditions I had signed wasn't to keep it but instead only rent. I remember double and triple checking the paperwork before signing, so I believe they switched it when they went to photocopy it. After a while I got a letter saying they would be getting someone to come and collect the PC and the fine for stealing it. Long story short, we didn't go to court. My lawyer, said that as shady as it appears, going to court all they are going to do is waste my time, so we came to an agreement that I pay the fine they want, in the end about another £400, and also I have to rent another product and they will let me keep the computer. I agree and rented the cheapest shitty iPad for a year and got in writing the computer was now owned by me. A year later they told me to return the computer and iPad. So I sent them a strongly worded letter with a copy of them saying I now own a computer. I dropped off the iPad and didn't hear from them again. I also spoke to a lot of other people online around the same time that had similar things happen. Nelk said, in elementary school my friend convinced me that his dad worked for Blizzard and was in charge of creating StarCraft II, this being in the late 90s, approximately a year or two after StarCraft came out and over a decade before the actual StarCraft II release in like 2010. For months, every day at lunch he would tell everyone at the table about how the latest missions that he was playtesting and all of the new story and the new units. The hero of StarCraft II was a Terran firebat named Bon Jovi and he had a Protoss girlfriend named Xena. For like a full year we would hear all these elaborate stories about what was happening and we were all so excited for the game to come out. If you went over to his house though you couldn't play it because it was only in Korean for now, and even if it was in English, his dad wouldn't let anyone else play it. We finally figured out he was just making it all up. Then, later on, the kid got expelled from school for biting a teacher. At age 17. Wonder what he's up to these days. Astramancer said, the only scam I've completely fallen for was a short change artist when I was 18. Ended up giving him $20. I've half fallen for, well, if not a scam, then a really shitty marketing scheme. I bought my house and moved in. 2 weeks later in the mail comes a water sampling kit and a flyer that very much looks like it was from a company contracted by the county to do spot tests of water quality across the system. It wasn't. It was a company that wanted to sell me a whole house water filter. I told them to fuck off and still occasionally get the sampling kits. I've wondered if they actually test the water or not. I'm guessing not even with pennies to buy test strips, and have considered putting mineral oil in one of the sample tubes and sending it back to see if they comment on my water quality when they call to try and schedule an appointment. Jealous Network 8852 said. When I was 18 or 19, I was a front-end supervisor at a local chain drugstore. Shoplifting was a pretty big issue, so we were always watching. An old man came in once to return 2 packages of Polaroid film cartridges, which were like $25 each. It seemed pretty clear that he had taken them off the shelf and brought them to the counter because I could see where he ripped the security tags off. This guy was definitely a pro though. He immediately asked my name, and alternated between being super nice, calling me by name and playing the sweet confused old man, and yelling, "Why are you doing this to me?" He kept saying he bought the wrong type, so I told him we couldn't issue a cash refund, but could do an even exchange. He went and got 2 more, slightly different packs of film, did his alternating between nice and angry routine still trying to get cash, then finally accepted the exchange and left. That's when I realized he just put the 2 new packs of film in the bag with the 2 he wanted to return and walked out with 4. He caused enough commotion that I completely missed it. Still pisses me off 25 years later. Cleve said, "Oh man, I got a good one. Back in 2015, I started working in production control for a company that made boat parts. It was a little bit of a red flag when they told me that upwards of 90% of their sales were to one customer, but management assured me that there was nothing to worry about because they had been doing business this way for almost 20 years. In early 2017, that customer announced that they were discontinuing several of their models, many of which we made parts for. I was a little concerned, but management assured me that my job was safe because they would just increase production on the boats we still made parts for. In early 2018, the parent company announced they were going to split off and sell their boat manufacturing group. I asked my boss if I should dust off my resume, because why do you sell something that's making a profit and doing well? He assured me that I had nothing to worry about, that it was a pretty common thing in the business world, but it was all kind of complicated. Mid-2018, our main customer announced that they were dismantling their boat manufacturing group, and not only would they not be ordering any more stuff from us, but they were just going to scrap the boats they had in production, so we couldn't even count on having a couple of months of income from the sale of these parts. I got laid off. Cleve said, I started looking for another job and posted my resume online. In July, I got a call from a lady, let's call her B, who said she was a recruiter for a chemical company in a neighboring state, in a town not far from where I had some relatives. She said she saw my resume and thought I'd be a good fit for that chemical company. I would essentially be doing the same job, but the pay was almost double what I was making at the boat place. So I agreed to an interview. A couple of days later I got another call from B saying that she had set up a phone interview with P, who was the hiring manager at the chemical company. I spent a few hours digging into the website. Chemical company had holdings in North America, Asia, and Europe. I found P on LinkedIn. Everything looked legit. Did the phone interview with P, and the next day, B called me back and made me an offer, which I accepted. So I gave my landlord notice I was moving out, started wrapping up my affairs in town, and getting ready for an interstate move. My start date wasn't until mid-August of 2018, so I had like a month. Made arrangements to stay in my relative's guest house for a couple of months until I found a place, got a storage unit for my stuff, set up a truck rental, all the stuff you do to get ready to move. Then like a week before my start date, I got a call from B. Cleve said. She said they wanted to push my start date back a week, since they had auditors from corporate on site and they didn't want to focus on training someone new while they were undergoing a process audit. Sounded reasonable, even if it was a little inconvenient for me. So I called the utility company and the cable company in the truck rental place and my landlord, explained the situation, and got everything pushed back a few days. Had to pay some fees, which was irritating, but overall, no harm done. The next week, I got another call from B. She said they wanted to push my start date again so that I wouldn't be starting in the middle of the pay period. Okay, that kind of makes sense, I guess. So once again, I rescheduled everything and paid some additional fees to do so. The following week, I called B and confirmed that everything was still on track. She said it was, so I went ahead and loaded up the truck and turned in my apartment keys and moved. Got everything I didn't need right away in storage, settled into my relative's guest house, and the day before I was scheduled to start my new job, I got another call from B. My stomach turned, because I was sure she was calling to tell me that there was another delay, and I was running a little low on cash by this point. But instead, she told me the name of the contact person I was supposed to ask for and wished me good luck. Cleve said, I made the commute the next day, showed up 15 minutes early, went to the security reception desk, introduced myself and asked for my contact person. They Lady Flip looked at something on her computer and was like, we don't have anyone by that name here. I figured I made a mistake somewhere, maybe misheard it or wrote it down wrong, something like that. So I asked for P, the HR manager. She looks up something on her computer and says P doesn't work out of this location. He's in a different state. So now I'm very confused, and I call B. She says not to worry, there's just been some kind of miscommunication, to just hang out and she'd call me back in 15 minutes. So I wait 15 minutes. Then I wait another 15 minutes. Then another. After an hour, I called B again. We're sorry, the number you are trying to reach is no longer in service. Please hang up and try your call again. It was surreal. I mean, I was just dumbfounded. I had no idea what was going on. I ended up driving back home and trying to call B a couple of more times that day, but got the same message that the number was out of service. I'd obviously been had, but the question that bothers me even now is to what end. I never gave B any money, or any info that wasn't on my resume. So why would she go to such lengths to get me to uproot my life? I mean, I know the old adage about everyone being the villain of someone else's story, but I can't honestly imagine what I could have done to anyone to make them go that far to screw me over, not to mention rope a second person into the plan. Cleve said. Anyways, I went into panic mode and took the first crappy job I got offered, then used it as a stepping stone to my current position, which is better than what I moved here for. So I guess the story has a happy ending, but I still think about that sometimes and wonder what the actual fuck was going on. TLDR, got scammed into moving to a neighboring state for a job that didn't exist. Edit. The strangest thing by far, in my opinion, is that a couple of times, when people asked me what made me move and I told them this story, they've said yeah, I've talked to a couple of other people that happened too. Seriously? How often does this happen that some people have talked to more than one person that went through this? Rum and Napalm said. The only thing I can think of is that B works for another company, and that the plan is 1. Get you to move closer to them with a juicy fake job offer 2. Now that you're in an unfamiliar state with no income, they send you a crappy job offer because you are in panic mode. We had something weird happen to me at my old job. Boss gets a call asking if we can make some specialized equipment. Sure, no problem, we spend a few months building it, and once it's all done, we start planning shipping and ghosted. Like everything was set for international shipping, we were metaphorically about to load everything on the boat. Just needed the client to pay for shipping and half the contract, never came. So now we are stuck with surplus equipment, and trying to recoup the losses. Suddenly, another client, same region as the first calls us. He needs the exact same things as 1, but he's offering much less than number 1. A couple of us told the boss that this sounds like someone knows we're trying to cut a loss and is trying to get stuff cheap. Correct Donut said. This isn't elaborate, but I was just dumb. So maybe a year ago the landline gets a call and I answer and it's some Indian man asking me to confirm the purchase on Amazon of a $700 iPhone. This is something I'm thinking my brother bought because his phone broke a day before and he's buying it with my mother's account. So I'm telling the guy no, don't buy it, cancel it. I'm telling him my mom isn't home and just wait for now. He keeps on saying no, we have to do it right now because his store will close. LMAO, gosh, I'm so dumb. Anyway, so he tells me to get on Amazon and so I go get my mother's laptop and I open Amazon and I say we have no order history and he's getting mad at me because I'm not fast enough and he needs the billing information and such. My 12-year-old brother comes and asks who I'm talking to. And I'm like, I think our other brother bought a phone for $700 and we need to stop it. And he's like, you're so dumb, ask for the manager. And I was like, can I speak to the manager? And the scam guy says okay, let me get her, and not even a second later the same guy using a woman's voice says hello. It was the same Indian man using the girl voice, and then I realized how dumb I was. Gosh, IDK, I'm blonde and it shows. Casual Awful said. I'm not even sure what this scam was or what they were trying to accomplish, but I clearly fell for something. I get a call on my cell from some guy who states he's working for a human resources company. He tells me my father, who lives halfway across the country, had signed on to volunteer with an organization which I know is local to their community and had put me as a peer reference. My father hadn't told me he was doing that, but it was not out of character for him, so I assume legit. Guy on phone tells me his business had been contracted to do background checks for that organization and follow up on references. Guy sounds like a native English speaker, even sound like me might be from the area my parents live. He states my father's name and address, asked to confirm I'm his child. I agree, and it doesn't set off alarm since he told me, didn't ask. He asks some generic questions about my dad that you'd get on a peer reference, basically rating him on friendliness, honesty, communication, hard work, etc. Again, I'm not really giving any vital information, so my alarms aren't going off. Then he starts transitioning to health information. Asks if my dad can reliably lift 20 pounds and carry it some distance. This seems a bit odd, but potentially he'd have to do some light manual labor at volunteering, so I agree he could handle that. Then they start asking quite specific questions about health conditions he's had, including past injuries and surgeries. Asking me if they're accurate and would affect his ability to volunteer. Casual Awful said, "This where I get kinda weirded out because it felt off that a peer reference call would bring up personal health information at all. I basically try to wave it off and say I don't know about all that stuff, really, although I do, and try to brush past it. Soon the guy is done, thanks me for my time, and ends call. The whole thing feels weird and I talk it over with my wife and she agrees. Call my parents and, of course, my dad hasn't volunteered with anything nor put me as a peer reference. I couldn't figure out what kind of scam this was. I guess I confirmed some demographic information they could use for identity theft, but they seemed already to know it, and it was information that was probably discoverable online. The health stuff was really odd. It seemed like a private investigator looking into a disability or unemployment claim. But my dad was retired and had no such claims outstanding." Damned English Rubbery said, "My wife manages a consignment store, and one of her employees fell for this. Guy calls and says he is Washington State Police, we live in Texas, and that the store is being investigated for tax fraud. The girl that answered is 16-17, and fairly sheltered, so she is immediately freaked out. WSP guy says if she doesn't cooperate she would be added as an accomplice, and such, but she could just get the whole issue resolved. All she had to do is get $1K out the safe. Girl was a key holder, so she does have access to the safe, and go to Walmart, get $2,500 Visa gift cards and give them the numbers to pay the back tax, then all is fine. Dingbat did it. Told the other workers she was taking her break, took the cash, got the cards and read off the numbers to the dude." Squatchy Jones said, "I was 19 and was desperate to get out of my shitty job at a lumber mill and start my own business. I was approached by a random dude in a nice suit as I was loading groceries in my car one night, and he started talking to me about a business opportunity. I asked why he picked me out, and he said he could tell I had a good work ethic and looked like an honest person. I bought his bullshit hook, line and sinker and traveled to a town an hour away every night for a week for training. Eventually I found out that it was essentially a MLM scheme but with smoke alarms. I already had a lot of self-confidence issues, and that whole experience just piled it on even more." Big Bad Zord said, "I met this guy outside of a hip-hop concert, and he was beatboxing while other people rapped to it. The sounds coming out of this guy's mouth were unfucking believable. He sounded like an actual acoustic drum kit, still one of the craziest things I have ever heard. I talked to him about doing some sampling work, which I would pay him for, and get his number. Call him a few days later about coming in to record. He declines, but he says he has some hash and if I bought some it would help him out. So later that evening when I am downtown I meet up, I buy $30 worth of hash off him, to find out it is essentially peanut butter. I call him back the next day to tell him I'm not even mad, I want to pay you to beatbox. His girlfriend wife something picks up his phone, mad as hell, telling me she doesn't know where he is, but if I find out to tell her so she can beat his ass. Elaborate in the fact that a dude talked me into paying him less by going through the effort of ripping me off." I Don't Care 4205 said, "Oh god, this one is embarrassing. I had a MacBook I got for college in 2011. About 2014 it had started to slow down and just not really work as well. One day I power on the computer and there is a message when I get to the home screen that the computer has a virus and I needed to call this number so they could walk me through fixing it. Big mistake, I called the number. Nice dude on the other end, said he was from Apple and gave me all of these official sounding things that made me believe it. He said I needed to provide him with my laptop's serial number, as well as some other specific numbers details to get rid of the virus. When I gave him all of this, he was able to move the mouse around my laptop screen, opening and closing different windows. I was on the phone with him as he was explaining that he was doing this and I thought it was so cool. Then he tried to go and purchase some subscription virus protection and that is when I was like, this seems fishy. Then I realized I had just given this person complete access to my entire computer and everything on it. I shut off the computer but by the time I got to the Apple store it was too late and long story short I was never able to use that computer again. Cat of the Decade said, "Don't feel bad. I work in information security and we get this all the time, even from seasoned IT people who should absolutely know better. One time a moderately high middle manager fired off a very sternly worded email to me, at the time, team leader, the CIO, CTO, and CISO. He said he was dealing with a very severe ransomware attack and McAfee was unable to RDP into his laptop because of our firewall. He was extremely upset that we were refusing to just open 3389 for a few minutes. His email concluded with "Explain yourselves." I don't know what conversation took place behind the scenes because I never heard another word from him. But yeah, it's common. Edit, for anyone missing out on the joke, McAfee didn't call him. He called the number on the "Your computer is infected" screen. They claimed to be McAfee, and attempted to remote into his system, which the most basic level of our security infrastructure immediately blocked. Hexajo said, "On my first trip to San Francisco, some guy stopped me and asked the time. He mentioned he was late to the sold-out Metallica concert, which was happening that night. We got to talking, and he said he had a hookup, and could probably get me into the show. So, I said sure. We hung out most of the day, visiting some tourist areas. We talked about Metallica, music, and just got to know each other. When we got to the venue, he said he needed $20 to get the wristband. Now, we had been hanging out all day, so, without thinking, I gave him the $20, and he headed to the box office. The minute he was out of sight, I realized it was all a scam. He never came back. It was a super elaborate scam, because he spent like 4 hours with me, just to make $20. But, ever since then, I never talk to strangers. Especially in a big city. If a stranger approaches me, I just keep walking and don't reply." Edgar said, "Back in 2006 I was browsing some website when I saw a banner ad that said, 'Who is Benjamin Stove?' It was mysterious, a bit weird, and made me curious. So I clicked it and it took me to this website with an interesting story. This guy had found a painting from 1913 with crop circles and was trying to find out more about it and its last owner, Benjamin Stove, who had abandoned his farm and left this painting in 1988. I absolutely love unsolved mysteries and this immediately caught my attention. I dove into the discussion forums on the website and began learning what people had already found out. For the next week or two I was obsessed with this website, this mystery. So much that I would even check it during my free periods and lunch at school. There were all these weird things involved with this, thinking the painting was haunted, aliens, possible murder. Eventually, with everyone working together from all over the country, the mystery was solved and we found Benjamin Stove. However, the whole thing ended up being an art marketing campaign from GM, so none of it was real. It wasn't necessarily a scam, but it did suck finding out that this really cool story I invested a lot of my time in was all made up. There are a ton of saves of the website on the Wayback Machine if anyone is curious as to how it was and dive into the discussions. They actually ended up mailing me a print of the painting, with a list at the bottom of the people, including me, that were actively participating on the forums. Here is a picture of it. Justinc182 said, "A few girls at my high school catfished me using text messages, MySpace, Formspring, remember that, and fake photos to convince me that I had met this girl and she thought I was cute but was too shy to talk to me. Anytime we did a meetup, She would bail last second and make a comment about what I was wearing to convince me she was real and actually there to see me. This went on all summer, from May to end of August. When school started again, the phone number texted me again saying it was all fake and they just wanted to get my hopes up for nothing and hurt me. The worst part was they told me it was several girls at my school, but they wouldn't tell me who. So I went the rest of my high school years never knowing who catfished the shit out of me, after I shared loads of personal and private info with them.